Today, we discuss the two presidential nominees and what they had to say when asked about their foreign policy plans at the New York Public Forum. Then Congress has struck down a budget plan for fighting the Zika infection, showing partisanship might be contagious. And finally, Colin Kaepernick defends his actions during the national anthem to sit, but it's something some can't stand. Allison Stephens, Sara Weston, and Brenden Solliwada are here with us today. Thank you for joining us. This is The Scramble. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Our guests today are Clark County District 4 Regent Allison Stephens, college Republican and UNLV student Sara Weston, and former Bernie Sanders activist and campaigner and UNLV student Brenden Solliwada. We begin on our first topic. On September 7th, the two major party nominees met in Manhattan, New York for a televised public forum. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump spent most of the night discussing their foreign policy expertise and planned policy. Mrs. Clinton vowed to not send in ground troops into Iraq, quote, ever again, noted her role in the bin Laden raid, and stated defeating ISIS was her, quote, highest counterterrorism goal. Mr. Trump defended his relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying Putin's 82% approval rating in his nation validated the relationship as kosher. Trump blamed the rise in veteran suicides to the ineptitude of the Department of Veterans Affairs as a, quote, almost corrupt enterprise, and insinuated he had learned some shocking new information involving President Obama. We begin, though, on Mrs. Clinton's forum. Was she successful in showing valid expertise, and was her defense on her email scandal enough to quell the masses from yearning for another answer? Ms. Stephens, I'd like to first start off with you. Let's start off with the email scandal. And is it even a scandal to begin with?
For me, it's not a scandal. It's been investigated, it's been reviewed, and the chapter's closed. We continue having people to bring it up, but I'd much rather focus on issues that are going to be pertinent to the office of the presidency of the United States. And Secretary Clinton really demonstrated that she is ready on day one, has the expertise, the background, the experience to really focus in and defeat ISIS and to use troops as a last resort.
Well, very finely said, but talking about the email scandal, there are people, of course, who are proponents of still looking at it, even though they might not see it as, or they might see it as something pertinent to the campaign. And I bring that over to you, Sara. As we're looking at Hillary Clinton and looking at the email scandal, is it something, as Ms. Stephens stated, is it a scandal or is it not?
I think the scandal revolves around her lack of trustworthiness. I think that the scandal seems to happen that there's a lot of dead bodies along the Clinton path to the White House. I think that the scandal rises in the foundation. I think that the scandal rises, it's not just one simple thing. If it were just emails, then I would probably agree with Ms. Stephens. However, it's accumulation of a bunch of different scandals that seem to all be tied to Hillary Clinton. And I think that what the American public is upset about, what average Joe Schmo is upset about, is if Ms. Stephens did that, or you did that, or I did that, or he did that, we would all be in Leavenworth.
Right.
But because it's Hillary Clinton, she gets a pass. It's not just the email scandal, it's, you know, the meeting with Loretta Lynch that her husband had on a tarmac that was supposed to be private. It was her promising to keep Ms. Lynch on as AG. It was in a whole bunch of the rules don't apply, and Hillary Clinton is the epitome of the rules don't apply.
I'm sorry, I'd have to disagree with
Sure,
that
let's go back
because
to you.
the reality is that if I were investigated, we would all be innocent until proven guilty. She was not proven guilty, and then once that occurs, we get to all move on. It's just drumming up one more accusation and trying to keep something alive to create scandals where there are not. There's nothing there, otherwise the FBI would have found that. And in addition to that, Loretta Lynch actually didn't make a recommendation. It came because of that meeting. People questioned it. That's valid. And so they said, hey, we will let the FBI make that decision. The decision was made by United States law enforcement. That's it. That's the end of the day. And as a private citizen, I would have the opportunity to move on with life once I was found innocent until proven guilty. And unfortunately, people are not giving Secretary Clinton that opportunity.
Well, she's also running for the highest office in the land.
But that was your comparison.
But the comparison is she fit to be president? On your own comments, you said there's no one else with her experience. So with her experience, like, let's just talk about it. She blew national security. I mean, she knew that you were not supposed to have those kind of servers in. She's not, I mean, a lot of people Donald Trump makes a gaffe every week. That is, every week you're like, oh my God, as a Republican. Not many of us are very happy voting for him. We do not, I'm not going to speak for the collective of the party, but I will say in my own, I'm not, racing to the polls to vote for him in the manner that I have been some other people. However, when you're looking at Hillary Clinton in the totality of everything, she knew what the rules were. If it were a private in the Army, he would be in prison.
By the FBI investigating, and also per Colin Powell, right? So, that...
Well, and Brenden, I'm going to give you time.
I get the implications of her using her private email and how, had someone been able to hack into that, how dangerous that could have been. And I understand that she's running for the office of president, but if we're going to go after her, why not Colin Powell too? Especially since the State Department, I believe 3 days ago, released a memo saying how he not advised her, but he gave her advice about how to use a private server. I think it's only fair, if we want to go after Hillary Clinton, then we need to go after Colin Powell.
Well, let's shift gears a bit and go on to Donald Trump. Looking at him, he didn't provide at the forum much in the way of tangible policies, but rather stances. His stance on Iraq as being a mistake, his stance on the VA being inadequate, and his stance on associating himself with Vladimir Putin. Was what he brought to the table enough to show voters this businessman can be foreign policy proficient? Back to you, Sarah. Looking at Donald Trump, does this really show the adequate amount of foreign policy expertise that the American people need to see in a presidential candidate?
I can't answer for everyone. I mean, obviously, the Republican Party held a fair nomination, which is probably more than I can say for the Democratic Party with the WikiLeaks emails. And he won the votes. And so the one thing I will say is there's many in the Republican Party that are not happy with our nominee. And a lot of people feel that he has taken the party hostage, and that this should have been an easy sweep. After 8 years of a Democratic nomination, the red wave we had, that there's a lot of people on the right that may vote for Donald Trump, but are not, we're not excited about it, So I am not personally aghast at his relationship with Vladimir Putin. I don't think that I think that Vladimir Putin is a strong leader. And I think that he shows, if America dropped from a world power source to a third world country or a second world country, I would hope that we had a leader that would want to bring us back up to world source.
Regent Stephens, I want to throw it back to you. Looking at that, we have Vladimir Putin, who is a Russian president that is supporting one of our nation's presidential candidates. It is a motion of what some might consider a warming of what would be Cold War relations. Looking at that, Trump's speech at the public forum altogether, does that seem something like to you that you find adequate in a presidential candidate or not?
Well, I think I have to disagree a little bit with your original premise on this, that he just gave a bunch of stances and nothing about policy. I thought the policies were pretty clear, right? He said that our brave women who go into the armed forces should accept sexual assault as some sort of natural hazard of their occupation. He talked about collaborating with someone like Vladimir Putin and how great he believes that is, when that is not what our national security advisors are stating, and we can see what's been happening in Eastern Europe over the past couple of years, and clearly believes that those are appropriate policies. And in addition to that, he said that our armed forces were in rubble, quote, rubble. And if for anyone to believe that that's an appropriate way to even describe that on an international platform is inappropriate. And I can tell you, my father, who was a World War II veteran and went into that war at the age of 15, would be aghast at the idea of someone who is going to go for the job of commander-in-chief, talking so poorly and about our armed forces and our military and even our veterans. There are ways to improve that system, but the way he's categorizing it is just inappropriate.
Going off of that, Brenden, rhetoric has been a dominating factor of this campaign, just as Ms. Stephens has said, Regent Stephens rather. Looking at what has been said and how it has been said, to you as a voter, how does that show how Donald Trump has held his campaign with the words he's been using?
I can understand why people like his appeal, is that he's off the cuff. He doesn't play it safe. He doesn't script what he says. At the same time, though, when it comes to being commander-in-chief, you cannot have those off-the-cuff moments and just let whatever thing comes into your head come out of your mouth. It comes across as unprofessional. He says things that one minute he believes, and the next minute takes back. I don't think it's appropriate if a president just mouth off like that. I understand, having that kind of bravado and then not caring about being scripted. I do appreciate that. I can understand why it's appealing, but it's not the end-all be-all of what a president should say or should do.
Well, let's look at what we should do in Nevada instead. The Hillary camp released a plan for college education recently. The plan dictates that 24,000 Nevada students would pay no tuition for a 4-year college degree, and, quote, 88% of Nevada households would pay no tuition. This flavor of policy may remind many of the Bernie Sanders platform. Is this a carbon copy, or are we looking at something originally Hillary? Going back to you, Ms. Stephens, let's look at this said and aforementioned plan. What are the contents really showing for what Hillary wants to do in Nevada? Show it off.
So it's twofold. First, let me just express, as a member of the Board of Regents, I led the fight against the last tuition increases. And so I'm very tied to this particular issue, but also understand that we've had budget constraints, particularly since 2008, that have led to astronomical tuition increases. So this is something that we absolutely need. When it comes to things like continuing or reinstating summer Pell Grant, that is really going to help working folks, people who are going into our community colleges, because they need the opportunity to be able to work, manage their families, and go to school over the summer. Now, what's really key, and why this isn't a carbon copy of Senator Sanders' plan, is that she's really focused in on what would create college affordability. And so it doesn't just stop at free tuition. It also incorporates some other aspects that would help with non-tuition costs. And we know that particularly for low-income students and for students at the community college level, which are really important, especially at getting into our universities or Nevada State College, that it's those non-tuition costs that can really cause issues for our students, especially because we're a really diverse community. And so, like you mentioned, this actually would help 88% of Nevadans to save approximately a little over $26,000. And I was just reading in the Chronicle of Higher Education that we only have a median per capita income of $25,000. So we're actually talking about saving that over a year's worth of income for individuals to be able to improve their lives, to contribute to our economy, and for us to be able to diversify our economy in Nevada, which was a key issue for us with the Great Recession, just relying on that one industry. So this is something that Nevadans really need.
And Sarah, I want to throw it back to you right off of that. Looking at this education plan, do you find that there are things that you would find a criticism of the plan or something that you wish would be changed?
The one thing about it is the reasonable, that the Board of Regents, the universities and the colleges are going to keep Nevada tuition reasonable. Reasonable is an ambiguous term. There's case law from the Supreme Court that defines various and sundry terms of reasonable. And with the tuition hikes that have gone up over 100%, not including the next 2 years where it's 2% more. I mean, I am a product of community college. I excelled at community college. I have been propelled because of the work at CSN to the Honors College at UNLV, and as a transfer student, which does not happen very often, to do university and research honors. I believe in community college and I believe in college affordability. That being said, there are people on UNLV's campus that there's 12 to 15% homeless students on UNLV's campus, not to mention Clark County School District and how many homeless students are in that wouldn't even have, lunch or food if it weren't for 3 Square. And so the problem that I have with this plan is the Board of Regents, and no disrespect to you, Regent, but the Board of Regents' ability to keep costs down in Nevada for tuition. Because the truth of the matter is there was a tuition hike in 2012. It was supposed to go to student services. There was a tuition hike in 2014, which will combine to make it 17% over the next 4 years. UNLV wants to raise student fees. CSUN has a 56.2% fee increase on the table that I hope when it comes before the regents, if the student body isn't smart enough to vote that down, I hope the regents will be smart enough to vote that down.
Well, Stephens, I'll give you the last word on this topic, looking at the plan. What would you have to say in response to those sorts of criticisms?
So I'd say that these are two totally different issues, right? What's happening at the state level is a result of our legislature not funding higher education and the regents having to operate these institutions, and that's entirely separate from some of the federal issues that we're talking about that President Clinton, or Secretary Clinton is proposing. And in addition to that, I think it's really important. I'm a UNLV alum, and I came out with debt. And what she's talking about is actually giving people like me an opportunity to refinance that debt so that we're not paying astronomical interest rates. We should not be making a profit off of student debt. And so those are things, there's a calculator on her website where you can actually go in, plug in how much debt you have, see how much it would be reduced. And so those are the practical ways that Secretary Clinton is demonstrating the policies that she would implement and the way that they can impact us individually.
But how do you define the word reasonable? Because again, that's what her language in her bill sets forth is reasonable. And my argument to reasonable is that number one, it's subjective. And number two, if it's left in the hands of the colleges and universities.
It's not. It's left up to the legislature, and then we have
to
respond. And so that's your opportunity to vote in your state legislature. But if you have suggestions about more appropriate language that would actually fit, I'm not exactly sure what the proposal is or what the flaw is. Reasonable. There's a reasonable person clause that has been defined time and time again in law. You even mentioned that yourself, and so I think it's an entirely appropriate way to couch this proposal.
And we'll have to leave it right there for that topic. Going from what the government will pay for, let's go to something the government will not be paying for. The United States Congress struck down a Zika funding plan in a country that has 2,721 confirmed cases of the Zika infection. The plan, outlined to be worth $1.1 billion, has failed 2 previous times in the United States Senate. The disputed reason? A caveat to cut money from Planned Parenthood had been earmarked into the plan. Democrats then moved to vote against the plan due to the cut, amounting to a 52-46 vote in the negation. Moving past the importance of Zika funding altogether, there are Democrats filibustering here and Republicans accused of earmarking non-negotiable deals. Who's in the right here and who's to blame? Brenden, I'm going to go to you for this. We're looking at Zika here. Who is at fault for this being blocked?
I would say it's fault on both sides. I wouldn't say evenly, maybe 30% Democrats, 70% Republicans, and this is why. Democrats, they're the ones who called for money to go to combat Zika. And they were offered a plan by the Republicans, and all things considered, governance is about working together, passing legislation and whatnot. So maybe they should take it. That being said, as we know about Zika, it is transmitted sexually, and it's affecting mostly infants in the womb. So to not give money to an agency like Planned Parenthood, whose one of its main tenets is reproductive care, it seems stupid. It really does. It seems almost like a war on sex and pregnancy. It makes no sense why you would do that, especially considering who is affected mostly by it.
And let's look at this from your perspective, Sarah. I mean, what has been brought up here is Planned Parenthood. And looking at that being earmarked into the bill, is this entirely at fault of Republicans, or does it fall on the Democrats?
I'm a huge advocate for Planned Parenthood. I am a pro-choice Republican. I know that it doesn't happen very often, but I believe that Planned Parenthood, they do about 0.004% of abortions, and the rest of the stuff that they do is for women's health and pap smears, mammograms, all that stuff. And so, I think each bill should rise and fall on its own, and there shouldn't be any pork involved in any of our bills. And I think that that's part of what adds to the gridlock that the citizens on the left and the right, the middle, we don't get what we need because they can't satisfy their special interest and lobbyists, and that's what needs to stop.
And I'll give you the last word, Ms. Stephens, on this real quick. As we're looking at this is, as she said, more just pork. So is there something that has to be changed at the congressional level or something at the bill level?
At the end of the day, Secretary Clinton has been speaking out against the Zika virus all year, and as early as March proposed, I think it was $1.8 billion in emergency funding. And so I believe that she is the person who will be able to handle this as well as other emergencies and health crises as we see them. And so, I think there have been other issues that have been brought up across the presidential election, including during the primary runoff, as far as our political process and our political system. And I think that all of those issues are kind of separate from this particular issue of the ability for people to get adequate health care and for us to stop an epidemic that could continue and spread in ways that we don't even know yet. I mean, we're talking about it being sexually transmitted, but that was something that we only recently understood. And so we don't really have a grip on this, and we need to be following Secretary Clinton's plan in order to get this under control.
Well, on to our last topic then. Prior to a 49ers and Packers game, the crowd and players stood up to recognize the American flag during the national anthem. 49er quarterback Colin Kaepernick, however, decided to stay seated during the anthem. In his words, Kaepernick defended his actions, saying, quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color." Since the game, opponents of the stance have taken to burning Kaepernick's number 7 jersey in protest. Kaepernick has the right to sit and do this, so was it out of bounds to take a Black Lives Matter protest onto the field? Sarah, I'm going to leave this up to you when it comes to Kaepernick. What do you think that Kaepernick should have done, if anything, and do you think he has the right to do it?
I think Kaepernick has the right to protest and invoke his First Amendment right, just like anybody else does. I mean, I stand for the national anthem. That's my personal choice. I have brothers that fought in Afghanistan and fought in Iraq, and my grandfather, my great-grandfather fought for this country. I'm very dismayed at some of Donald Trump's words in regard to the Khan family, and I absolutely believe that Kaepernick has the right to stand or sit. My problem with the Black Lives Matter movement is, in theory, they have a phenomenal. Here's the truth: is that they have certain geographical locations that black people are disproportionately pulled over to white people. The data and the evidence supports that. However, when you start to protest hate speech with speech like, "What do we want? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. Let's kill all the police." It tends to make sane people not necessarily get behind your movement.
I just have to say, I've never heard that coming from Black Lives
Can I
Matter
actually jump
at
in?
all. Just want to make sure that's really clear.
I'll have Ms. Stephens answer this first. So let's go off of that. Black Lives Matter has been, in a sort of sense, bent off in these fringe groups. There are certain groups that are calling themselves and representatives of Black Lives Matter and have been labeled as such. Some, in some cases, of themselves labeling it, and others as being a proper representation of that establishment. Is this needing structure? Is it losing its form? Is it something that people can, a flag they can fly under?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is I have more concerns about the people dressed as Klansmen who were holding up Trump signs right here in Las Vegas.
Those were African-American
no,
proven.
that
They were
was
proven
not.
to be African-American people.
I personally, with the black elected officials, contacted the police and worked with them immediately, and so there was no proof of that. So that's not the issue. We also have people like David Duke. We have
I'm not going to defend David Duke.
But we also have something. But we also have something within the white supremacy community around the country that has been called the Trump bump, because they have experienced, based on Trump, a bump or an increase in their membership and so forth. And so those are the issues that I'm concerned with. Tackling or attacking people who are standing up for themselves and asserting that their lives have significance is not as concerning to me as a proven hate group that has been in existence for a very long time and has demonstrated violent activity supporting Donald Trump. That is the issue that we should be talking about.
Well, hold on. I'm going to let Brenden answer here because, Brenden, I want you to speak on this.
Yeah. I agree with you. We shouldn't respond to hate speech with hate speech. But this is how I see it. Black people in this country have had a vastly different experience than any other minority group in this country. I can personally say my ancestors were not in slavery. My ancestors were not subjected to Jim Crow. My ancestors were not segregated in schools. So I think for us, especially white people, to tell black people what they can and can't do when protesting a system that has been, and in many ways is continuing to work against them, I don't think it's my place. I really don't support violent speech. I don't support hate speech. And I haven't seen the pig in the blank comments. So I can't speak on that. But from what I see, I actually do support Black Lives Matter because I think they bring up a valid point, and I think they should be able to protest in a way however they want. I would hope it wouldn't be violent. That's my opinion on that.
And I want to allow you to respond.
They absolutely, I am all about protests. What I have a problem with is that I have heard them when they closed down Donald Trump's rally in Chicago, when he called that rally off. They were shown on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC, all networks, saying those things frying like bacon. My problem is, yes, there are bad police officers, absolutely. But part of the reason that those people are so insulated is the blue code that they have, also the union representation that they get with those contracts, that they protect them. That's the other thing. The next thing is they don't have the right to impede traffic. They don't have the right to my lane of travel when they are protesting. They absolutely have a valid concern, and the data supports that. However, I can't, first of all, change isn't going to be invoked. Change wasn't invoked by Dr. King without the Warren Court. So you need.
But he did break the law. But he did break the law, and so
but he also was quoted. Hold on, he was also quoted as saying in the Birmingham.
He still broke the law, and that's why he was in jail because he broke the law.
This discussion does lead us always wanting more, knowing more about ourselves, but that is our time. I want to thank our panelists as being as lively as we were. I think we had a good discussion, and you for watching our show and letting you know while all the other shows, just like The Ramble, will be right here for you on The Scramble. Thank you, and see you again.